Let's talk about people, real people, each living their own life, heading home from work, picking up groceries, maybe rushing to get dinner on the table. Eric Porter was doing just that. It was late in the afternoon and he was tired, probably thinking about what to cook when he got home, or how many emails he still had to answer tomorrow. He's driving along a busy Sacramento street, following the rules, minding his own business. That's when everything changes. Red and blue lights appear in his mirror. An officer signals for him to pull over. Now, no one likes being pulled over. It's unsettling. Your heart picks up a bit. You wonder, what did I do? Did I miss a sign? Is my taillight out? That's probably what was going through Eric's head when Officer Bradley Larson appeared at his window. From the moment Officer Bradley Larson approached Eric Porter's window, the energy felt off. Larson barely made eye contact when he demanded license and registration, as though he'd already decided Eric was guilty of something. Eric, who had no reason to believe he'd broken the law, attempted to stay calm, but he couldn't ignore the tension radiating from the officer. The typical formality of a traffic stop, handing over documents, answering simple questions, turned into a drawn-out interrogation. Each question Larson posed felt weighted with suspicion, suggesting that Eric's neat suit and reserved demeanor somehow made him more suspicious, not less. Larson scrutinized Eric's driver's license as if searching for a hidden clue, then asked where he worked and why he was in such a hurry. Even Eric's explanation, he was just tired and eager to get home, failed to dispel the officer's harsh gaze. It wasn't long before Larson ordered him out of the vehicle, a request that triggered alarm bells in Eric's mind. Still, Eric knew better than to argue on the roadside. He stepped out, hoping compliance would prevent further escalation. The harsh glare of passing headlights painted a surreal backdrop as Eric stood by his hood, the night air thick with unspoken accusations. Meanwhile, Larson wasted no time in conducting a pat-down that felt invasive and needlessly forceful. Although he found nothing suspicious, he continued prowling around the car, as if convinced Eric had something to hide. At that stage, Eric realized this was far from a routine stop. Indeed, with each passing minute, it became clear that Larson's questions had little to do with a potential traffic violation. Instead, they echoed an unspoken bias. He seemed fixated on the idea that Eric, a well-dressed black man driving a mid-range sedan, must be hiding something. The officer's tone carried undertones of disrespect, hinting at a deeper prejudice he either couldn't or wouldn't conceal. Eric, familiar with how quickly these situations could spiral, answered calmly, but felt a knot forming in his stomach. Eventually, Larson began asking about Eric's background and why he was in this particular neighborhood. The insinuation was as plain as day. Eric didn't belong here. Though nothing about the area was especially exclusive, Larson acted as though it was unimaginable for someone like Eric to simply live or work nearby. In an attempt to maintain composure, Eric explained that he worked for the city, keeping the details vague to avoid any further hostility. He wrote. Larson's probing continued, culminating in yet another attempt to pressure Eric into contradicting himself. Every time Eric provided a concise response, Larson's frustration mounted. He walked around the car, shining his flashlight into the back seat as though expecting to find incriminating evidence. By now, Eric was certain the stop had little to do with a red light and everything to do with an officer who saw him as a target. Even so, Eric chose his words carefully, aware that a single misstep could be used against him in the worst way. He persevered. As tensions rose, Larson commanded Eric to stand by the hood once more. This time, Eric sensed a shift in the officer's demeanor, a hint of triumph, as if he believed he'd cornered his suspect. Instead of reacting with anger, Eric took a steadying breath. When Larson accused him of being evasive and hinted that he might have illegal contraband, Eric quietly reached into his jacket pocket, telegraphing his move to avoid any misunderstandings. Pulling out a slim leather wallet, Eric flipped it open, revealing a polished badge. The moment Larson recognized the emblem of internal affairs, his bravado evaporated. He had just spent the last several minutes profiling a man who oversaw officer conduct for the department. It was a stark role reversal. Larson realized too late that every inappropriate word and action might come back to haunt him. Suddenly, the narrative he had spun about a suspicious individual unraveled before his eyes. Eric introduced himself as the head of internal affairs. In that instant, the power dynamic flipped. The officer who presumed authority over Eric now faced potential scrutiny for his own behavior. Larson's complexion paled as he stammered, attempting to explain or excuse his conduct. Yet no explanation could erase what Eric had already witnessed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an example of biased policing. Eric informed Larson that a formal complaint would be filed. For the first time, the officer grasped the gravity of his actions, and neither man would ever forget it. After the tension-laden stop concluded, Eric drove away with a mix of relief and determination. He knew that one encounter, however revealing, wouldn't single-handedly fix the systemic issues underlying such incidents. The following morning, he sat at his desk in Internal Affairs, reviewing Officer Larson's file. Past complaints, though never substantiated, painted a concerning picture of a man who seemed to toe the line between firm policing and outright harassment. Eric recognized that holding Larson accountable meant confronting a culture that sometimes allowed officers to operate without oversight. Rather than dismissing the problem as an isolated case, Eric consulted with colleagues who shared his resolve. They combed through training guidelines, scrutinized department policies, and identified gaps in how complaints were handled. A plan emerged: mandate implicit bias workshops, improve de-escalation tactics, and create a transparent complaint tracking system. Eric believed these measures would not only address officers like Larson, but also protect those who served ethically. Meanwhile, news of the traffic stop spread among other officers. Some were relieved that someone finally had the clout to challenge a colleague's questionable behavior. Others worried about a crackdown that might tarnish the department's reputation. Eric, however, remained steadfast. Good policing thrived on trust, and trust required accountability. If a badge became a tool for intimidation rather than protection, the foundation of law enforcement crumbled. By transforming his personal ordeal into impetus for reform, Eric hoped to foster change. He refused to let suspicion and prejudice dominate the city he had pledged to serve. Eric's confrontation with Officer Larson became a catalyst for broader introspection within the department and the community at large. To drive that progress forward, he worked with Chief Daniels and a committed group of colleagues to reinforce protocols that valued empathy over aggression and respect over authority. They implemented workshops on cultural competency, refined their guidelines for stop and search procedures, and promised transparent follow-ups for every filed grievance. None of these reforms were met without resistance. Critics argued that too many restrictions would weaken policing, yet Eric remained resolute that genuine safety came from bridging the chasm between officers and citizens, not widening it. Beyond the station walls, community members felt empowered to voice their own stories, sharing accounts of unjust stops that, until now, had gone unheeded. Whether they felt validated or emboldened, one fact was clear: the relationship between law enforcement and the people it served was shifting. The hearing concludes with Larson placed on suspension. A recommendation for more severe discipline is on the table, but the final verdict may take time as they review more evidence. In the end, it's not about punishing a single officer to make headlines. It's about ensuring the next driver, maybe a single mom on her way to a second job, or a college kid heading home, doesn't get targeted because of the way they look. If this story resonated with you, pass it along. What do you think? Comment below. I want to know your opinion about this matter. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, and also don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more of these kinds of videos. Thanks for watching.